Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Brittany Valentine, the Communications Coordinator at the National Harm Reduction Coalition, and we're thrilled to have Jakiera Stewart here with us today from We Care Tennessee to talk about the organization's work, harm reduction, and younger adults and youth, and why that all matters so much. So welcome, Jakiera. Thanks so much for joining us.
For having me.
Yeah, if you could take just a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about We Care Tennessee. What is the organization? What do you do at We Care Tennessee?
My name is Jakiera Stewart. I am the Director of Operations at We Care Tennessee. We Care Tennessee is based in Memphis, Tennessee. We are one of the only, really the only harm reduction organization that is specific to Black trans current and former sex workers. We do a plethora of services and programming at We Care Tennessee. So we are excited to be here.
Thank you so much for your time and energy joining us. We'd love to hear a little bit about, if you can break down how harm reduction shows up in your work, and what does harm reduction mean to you and to We Care Tennessee?
So We Care Tennessee has formerly been doing harm reduction work and taking it under our wing since we were funded by Help Connect. We have always done harm reduction services in a different way. We've just begun to get the funding to do the syringe exchange. So that's the traditional way harm reduction shows up. But we do a plethora of what we call wraparound services for folks who need those services. Like I said, the intersection of Black trans women, HIV, sex work, and drug use all kind of intermingle. We do harm reduction specific to folks who are transgender women and or folks who identify as Black transgender women. And so our harm reduction work looks like supplying syringes for folks who need them for hormone use.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, and love hearing all about that intersecting work and how important it is, certainly. Can you tell us a little bit about the community building work that you're doing with youth and younger adults, and how is the organization supporting and empowering youth and younger adults, and why?
Okay.
Why youth? Why younger adults?
Why not youth? Why not younger adults? I feel like more org should include and be inclusive and intentional about including youth and younger adults into their work, because at the end of the day, like I said, the intersections always meet up, or we find it in this work. We're inclusive of all folks, and so what that means is we had to be, and we wanted to be not just intentional about, like I said, Black transgender folks, but about youth, and so we are incorporating that work by adding those folks in that intersection into our national strategy to address opioid use, HIV, and help see. I was gonna say help connect, help see. So we want to be intentional about adding that strategy or adding those folks into our strategy for attacking this syndemic almost. So we want to be intentional about that, and being intentional about adding young folks at our table is that essential and crucial piece to, making sure we have great impact in our work.
Absolutely. I love that. Why not? Youth and younger adults, right? I love that so much. And just really sitting with what you shared about, that the intersections always link up or meet up. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing and what that work looks like. And so my next question is really a two-part question for you. When we think of youth and younger adults, there are so many barriers, right, that they might be facing when trying to live and thrive. So, what do you think are some youth and younger some barriers that youth and younger adults face? And then my second question is, how can we collectively, just collectively, even as a society, support them, regardless of where we are, regardless of our zip code? So if you can share a little bit about that and what your thoughts are.
I feel like there's so many things. I feel like when we talk about youth and young adults, we put them in a category of their own almost, when some of the same issues that we face as adults in adulting, sometimes unfortunately youth and young adults have to face at the same, at the same rate, at the same amount of impact. And some of them have been doing it longer than even some of us shelter adults. We have encountered just in service and homeless, or the homeless community, that a lot of youth are in survival mode, and they have the same or even more drive than a lot of people, or have to have more drive, with more barriers and more obstacles on top of that. So I think that as a community, we need to do more stigma busting, and addressing stigma, to take away some of the barriers that folks have for getting care and getting the resources that they need and not feeling shamed in their lifestyle and having to do what they need to do just because they're in survival. What we know about survival, what we're learning about survival and trauma is, you can't control it. You just deal with it. You just do what you have to do to move to the next point. Folks don't need the added barriers of stigma and shame and as a barrier to getting and accessing the needs and the resources that they have.
Absolutely. I'm thinking too, as you're sharing that, a lot of youth and younger adults, compared to a lot of the adults in their lives, don't have the same level of even like power and control over so many things, right? So I'm thinking of that as you're sharing and talking about survival mode. And so just wanted to recognize that and name that here. Thank you so much for sharing. So what else, do you think people should know about this work? Why does this work matter? And why do you show up every day to come to work to do this work? What is it that makes you come back every day and why does it matter?
I enjoy being a pipeline. I enjoy being a pipeline. And what I'm learning while doing this work is there is a major disconnect between strategy and lived experience. There's a lot of folks strategizing about how to address an issue, a public health issue or public health outcry. And they're looking at numbers and not addressing these numbers as actual people. And what we do and what I love about the work that we do at We Care is we connect real faces to this work. I love the fact that we address Black trans women, and we say that unapologetically. We address Black trans women in the Southern region at that. And to put a face to this work, to add these folks to the table and center them, give them a space at the table to come up with the strategy that will ultimately help them because it affects them is what gives me my drive. I love being the pipeline. I love making those connections between the folks that are affected and impacted and the folks that are making the strategies.
Wonderful. I love hearing that, the pipeline and just the power of that and community building that comes with that. And I just love what you shared too, really, trying to center folks and the folks with lived experiences should also be the ones, driving decisions and driving changes that are needed in our collective society, right? So just thinking about that and, how at the National Harm Reduction Coalition, we always talk about how, folks are the experts in their own lives. So listening to folks and particularly the youth, particularly younger adults to hear, what is it you need? What is it that we can be doing collectively to support you? So just love hearing that from you. And thanks again for sharing. And so speaking of youth and younger adults, for those folks who may not feel like they have a support system, that don't maybe have We Care Tennessee, in their corner, what or other folks who don't have We Care Tennessee in their corner, what is your advice for them? What is, a resource or what are some places that folks might be able to find that support if they don't feel they have that currently in their lives?
That's a tough question because I don't feel like there are enough folks centering young adults and being intentional about that. I mean like having youth informed, youth driven, youth having meaningful involvement and participation of youth. I don't feel like there's a lot of organizations or a lot of resources that are very intentional with it. I think that there are a lot of adults that are making strategies and making, telling youth what they should be doing and what they think and comparing it to their experience, which we know our experience is different now. It would have looked a lot different now than it did then. There's a lot of factors that play into that. So I would say for folks who are young and looking for those resources, I'll say create them yourself. Pull up a chair at a table or create your own table and bring your numbers to a table. Address that issue head on. Use your own lived experience. It's valuable. You are the expert. You're the only person. You're impacted. You're the only person that can tell you what works and what doesn't work and what strategies need to exist and what resources need to exist. And you have to speak up and say what you need. You can't be afraid of, what people are going to think and what's not going to work and where's the money going to come from. Use those survival skills. You know what you need. You have to tell people what you need. So I feel like that's my best advice is to speak up and be unapologetic about what you need. Have no shame about what you need. Have all the courage to tell people that's not going to work. That doesn't work. I'm not going to do that, and tell them why. So address the issue, come up with your solution and voice your solution and stand on it.
Love that. Unapologetically doing that. And yeah, I think what you're sharing just really just further validates, right? Youth and younger adults and their voices. And it already, their voices already are valid, right? But it just further, affirming that, reaffirming that. And I love that you mentioned, let's see, I'm looking at my notes here. Create your own table, right? Like make your own table. And just, really affirming that power that youth and younger adults can have. And just how far that goes, right? So I'm thinking about that as you're sharing. So great advice. Thanks again. Looking back now, what is something that you would tell your younger self? So your younger self, your youth self, younger adult self, what is something that, you'd like to tell that person today?
Don't be tokenized. Don't be tokenized. You know what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about, and they know you know what you're talking about. Um, as a young person, I've always been an advocate. I've always sat at tables. I've always been, sitting in and kind of being drug along almost. But I've always been a peer advocate. And back then I didn't know that I was in spaces because people acknowledged that I was a peer advocate and that what I had to say was valuable, and the solutions that I came up with and my peers came up with, they worked because their lived experience piece was there. Because I knew what I was talking about. I knew what I was facing. I knew the conversations and the situations that were actually happening, and not just theoretical, and not what was going on when I was a kid and navigating the school system. I knew, and they knew that I knew. And I was very, very tokenized as a youth, as a younger person, and knowing what I know now, especially applying it to my work. My solutions worked. My solutions got people in the room. They kept youth. They engaged youth. They engaged an audience that was hard to reach. And what I'm learning doing harm reduction work and being empowered by the harm reduction movement is it works. It works. And the proof is it works. It's working. People are applying it. People are adapting it. People are, taking it under their wing of work. It's a hot word almost. It's moving because it works. So that's my advice to my younger self is continue to do this and don't let people use you and your gifts. Do your own work.
Mhm.
Continue to lift up what you know is right and what your lived experience is, and don't allow people to give little you, what is it, big you, little U's and big eyes.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so I hope some of the older adults here listening to can really, sit with that and think about, it's not about, what things were like when you were younger, right? Like listen to the younger folks and in your lives right now, and they know, and their solutions and their strategies, they work, as you mentioned. So just really want to highlight that and lift that up. And this touches on what you shared earlier too, that there's strategy and hypotheticals and numbers and things, right? But coming back to, well, who are the people behind these strategies that typically adults are working on, right? And how can we really make sure that we're centering those most impacted, being younger and young adults and younger adults and youth. So thank you so much. And my last question is just really, anything else that you want people to know about We Care Tennessee, about the work you're doing, or just generally, harm reduction and how it intersects with everything that you're working on.
Yeah, so we are working on a project called Project Use currently. And Project Use puts Black trans sex workers and drug users at the forefront of their own experiences. We're actually doing a twofold piece project. We're actually conducting surveys with our Black trans leaders who are meeting monthly, quarterly, almost monthly, quarterly, to come up with a strategy that attacks HIV, Hep C, and the opioid crisis. We are planning to do a rollout of this the findings of these surveys and come up with a national strategy, um, with, like I said, our black trans leaders, to address those focus areas. So that's something that's important to us. That's happening really fast. We are almost at the middle, halfway mark of our 2-year strategy. And so yeah, I want people to be on the lookout for that, to be able to use those strategies and use the findings of these surveys and these lived experiences in their work and in their strategy.
Absolutely. And any last, places that you'd like folks to go? Are there any links or any, website, anything like that that you'd like folks to turn to if they're looking for more information about We Care Tennessee?
Sure. We can be found on Facebook. We can be found on Instagram. Instagram moves the fastest, and so does Facebook. But we also have a website, wecaretn.org is our website. We're working on, updating it, keeping it updated with events, upcoming events, putting a live calendar on there. There's ways to donate there. There's ways to see, again, a face to the work that we're actually doing, to see movement. And yes.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much again, Jakiera. Thanks for sharing with us. And everyone, we hope you found some really great information, some really great stories and experiences that you can use in your work. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Jakiera, for taking the time to talk with us. We appreciate it.